So we'll start out with Happy Birthday, Marine Corps! Hurrah!
Good.
Motivation.
So I'm going to read a little motivation quote real quick.
Oh, fuck yeah.
If you have an idiot and you motivate him, now you have a motivated idiot.
It sounds
Hell
like
yeah.
us, dude.
Love that.
Sounds like motivation.
I like it.
As I can't read. I found that the other day and I thought it was good.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you everyone for joining us on episode 2 of the False Motivation Podcast. Today we're going to talk, in today's episode, we're going to talk about what coffee does to the body and how we can make it a little bit more productive every day. And then we're going to move on to
getting comfortable with talking about mental health.
Yeah, getting comfortable with talking about it and getting comfortable with just being willing to even address it in the first place. Right. The idea, like I've had conversations with people who are uncomfortable with the idea of even trying to address their own internals. So, like, just getting people even comfortable to internally look at themselves is what I'm hoping that this episode is going to kind of help with a lot of people. So, are you guys familiar with what coffee does to the body?
It makes you want to poop.
So
he's not wrong. Not wrong.
Not at all. So when you are getting exhausted throughout the day of being awake, your body forms adenosine. Your body has receptors that consumes that adenosine as it's made throughout the day. As the adenosine builds up throughout the day, you get more and more tired. And then by the end of the day, you have a large load of adenosine in your neural pathways that cause you to get tired. So caffeine will go in and it binds to the receptors and stops your body from being able to consume the adenosine. So your body for a while feels awake because it's no longer increasing its number of adenosine it's consuming. So once caffeine wears off and the adenosine receptors become available again, that's when you get your wave of tiredness. Right. So then when the body starts consuming all that adenosine through the adenosine receptors, you start getting tired again. Well, I'm a huge fan of the Huberman Lab podcast, and he had a couple people on there talking about sleep and how caffeine works and all this stuff. And he does a great job of talking about. But one thing he preaches in there is to wait about 90 minutes when you wake up. Wait about 90 minutes before your first cup of caffeine. And the reason for that is when you wake up, you want to expose yourself to a bright light in order to create that large cortisol spike that turns your body and organs on for the day. But it will also flush out what's left of the adenosine that accumulated throughout the night or whatnot. So when you get the caffeine, you're kind of clear with the adenosine. So wait about 90 minutes before drinking caffeine after waking up, and it will actually prevent you from having a crash once the coffee. It will help prevent you from having a crash once the coffee wears off. Right. That's just one way to maximize and really get the best out of the coffee effectiveness. That has nothing to do with flavor. That's just effectiveness. It's amazing. So you may say, screw that.
90 minutes is a long time.
Yeah.
Get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Jump on the bike.
I've tried it. There was another thing that I tried when I was doing my was in school, and one of my professors was like, "Look, have you heard of a nappuccino?" And I was like, "No." And I'm like, "What's a nappuccino?" And she says, "Look, it sounds really silly. You can't knock it until you try it. So if you're really, really, really exhausted, or you need to because I'm a crammer when it comes to studying and shit like that." And she was like, "Look, just give this a shot. If you got about an extra 15 minutes, take a whole cup of coffee, drink that whole cup of coffee as fast as you can, lay down and close your eyes for 15 minutes. And what'll happen is your brain will kind of reset in that 15 minutes, which to me, that sounded like bullshit. But I gotta try everything at least once. So your brain will reset for those 15 minutes. You'll get that rest. And when you wake up, that's when the caffeine is starting to kick in. And shit, it works, man. So I tried that first. And then the same process that you had talked about, earlier, and that was I don't wait. I can't do the 90 minutes. So I've done it about 45 minutes. Woke up, took like this sounds silly, but gone outside with bare feet, sat in the sun for a second, and then gave it about 45 minutes. And it works because I don't know about you guys, but a cup of coffee doesn't do it for me, right? So I've got to have 2 or 3 or 4. But if you do it, if you can actually muscle it and make it, at least give it 45 minutes or an hour and give it a shot, it actually works really well.
So the coffee nap thing, I use that all the time because I drive truck, and we have mandated 30-minute break that we have to take at some point in our 11-hour day. And a lot of times what I'll do is, I'll typically eat while I'm driving because I don't want to stop and eat because that's a pain. But what I'll do is I'll take my 30, pull up to the fuel pump, fuel my truck up with fuel, pull around to the, off to the side. So just fueling up, using the bathroom, all that takes about 10 minutes. Grab a cup of coffee, pound a cup of coffee, crawl in my truck, sleep, take a 15-minute power nap. And about the time you wake up from that 15-minute power nap, that caffeine kicks in. And usually for me, a cup of coffee will get me about 4 hours before I start to come down off of that, off that caffeine drop.
That's awesome. I call them espresso power naps.
Yeah.
So I like to do espresso right before I do it, and then I'll go back to. Before I heard about the 90-minute thing and the effectiveness of it, I would wake up in the morning at 5 a.m. I would put back my coffee and actually go lay back down and go back to sleep for a half hour. And then by the time I got up, I was like, "Oh shit, wait."
Yeah.
But I've actually been practicing the 90-minute thing, and I can't always make 90 minutes, but it is a bit more effective. I'm a huge the bright light exposure. I'm a huge one on that one. When I wake up in the morning and the sun's out, I'll go sit in the patio and meditate for 10 to 30 minutes or so in the sun.
Have you guys ever done any breath work?
Oh, Wim Hof is my jam.
Breath work in the morning too is just incredible.
Dude, your lung capacity, if you can get into a solid routine of a breath work. So Wim Hof's breathing technique is about 11 minutes if you find his YouTube video where he walks you through it. He runs you through 3 cycles of breathing practices, and it is phenomenal. You get lightheaded, your hands get all tingly, you get warm. But after about a week or 2 of it, you can feel your lung capacity expand, and you can actually feel like a natural state of energy just throughout your day.
There's another thing that he was doing, and it's something that I do because I'm constantly throughout the day I'm getting stressed out about something. So he's got another shortened down version where he's like, I dare you to be upset or frustrated or mad, do your breathing exercise, and then still try to stay mad afterwards. It's impossible. Like it's all this kind of stuff. When I was younger, I'd have thought that like weird hippie shit. But the older you get, you need as much of an edge as you can, man. And so I started doing that breathing work, those breathing exercises, and they're incredible. Ridiculous.
Oh my God. So try them before you and your wife have sex. Try it, lay it. Both of you lay in bed before you do it. I've done it before. It's super effective. It's like breathing meditation, and then you lay in bed, you do your breath work, and then you go at it. I'm telling you, you're both more relaxed, you're more comfortable, you've got a larger air capacity, you're ready to go. You've spent a few minutes getting into the mental state. It's more comfortable. It brings up your confidence. There's so many things. It increases it. It works. Trust me.
That's a funny thing is I just saw the other day, and it was one of those things where you're going through social media and you see the video and you go to like save it or share it, and then it like you fat finger it and it disappears. But it was another one about the drinking a cup of coffee before having sex, and it's like there was a woman that broke it down, and she can track like her heart rate, and it was like 57% bigger her O phase. So I was like, it's pretty cool, but I think I'm gonna have a cup of coffee at like 9 o'clock at night.
I know, right? That's when you start morning exercises.
I was gonna say this Wim Hof morning deal. Also, running does it too. If you just go out and just run a mile in the morning, while your coffee's brewing. There's 60 minutes. You come back and your lungs are good, and the coffee's done, and you smash that, and then you get start your day that way. There's another option.
That's true. But running a mile in the morning makes me more upset.
I know. I don't know if I can like lay down next to my wife and do Wim Hof for like 30 minutes. I'm just kidding. That's a good option. I never even thought about that.
No, it is.
Put a link down in the description for everyone not paying attention.
I just take cold showers and cry, and then have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Clothes on. Clothes on.
I woke up from the
Drive
long nap.
Drive to work with your windows down when it's cold outside.
Right?
I do.
Love it. Hey, so I wanted to ask you guys, have you guys gotten any feedback from the episode? I have gotten just insane feedback, and people calling me out of the blue that I haven't talked to in years, who are just reaching out and just sharing their thoughts and grateful happiness, the fact that we're even doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I got some good feedback from what I would consider would be our targeted audience. A few guys that I serve with, a couple guys that I used to shoot with, they all really enjoyed it. I got some feedback from some not targeted audience that wasn't super great, but I don't know what you expect when you get a bunch of blue collar dudes together to talk about mental health stuff, and there's going to be some language and some uncomfortable conversations. So I guess my point is like, if this isn't for you, like, that's fine. It doesn't have to be for you.
Yeah.
So
it's not like you're paying for the prescription or subscription.
Right.
Yeah. Also, it costs $0 to just mind your own business. So
True.
Throw that out there too.
Okay, so my daughter came home the other day when I was just, go off and stuff. It's my daughter was like, "Dad, I got a saying." And I was like, "Okay, so from a 12-year-old kid, you're not expecting much." And she goes, "It is nice to be important." And I was like, "Okay." And she said, "But it's more important to be nice." And I was like, "Oh, I like that."
Yeah. Words to live by.
Right?
That's awesome.
Whoa.
Every once in a while, your kid just kind of like rocks your world, and you're like, "Oh shit, it's cool."
Which one was that?
Brooklyn.
Tell her I see her. We know.
Yeah, she's got a lot of her mama in her.
So I've had 5 conversations particularly that all stemmed around mental health from people who typically aren't comfortable talking about mental health. I've been utterly impressed with the feedback coming back. There's people who are just like, love the concept of what we're doing, or trying to do, or we're doing, not trying. What we're doing.
We're gonna do.
What we're doing. Yeah, what we're doing. And it has just been extremely heartwarming. I don't want to share too much about it, but a lot of them were just talking about the what's the word?
Stigma.
That's the word. Stigma of coming out and talking about mental health stuff. Like, they're like, I can't do it around my family. I can't lose. I'm the rock. I can't not be the rock in the family. So it has just been utterly impressive for me personally, and really exciting. And it really gives me a strong belief that this is really going to succeed because of the amount of feedback and love that this has already had from one episode at least.
Oh,
Nice.
Hey?
that's cool.
Right? So pat yourself on the back. That's just one episode, very first try, no structure. And we came through and bloop. Now, don't remember, just because that felt awesome, we're still going to have shitty episodes in between everywhere as we're learning and refining our process.
I think this is going great.
So, we need to get this sound figured out. But I got a lot of positive feedback. Like, it's super cool that we're talking about this. Especially me and Brian with our careers. Like, I had a lot of people in my field, talk to me about it and be like, dude, I think it's cool that you guys are doing this. But like, here's some suggestions. And like everyone's gonna give those. Whether we want them or not. But they. Like that, the feedback I got was like it's a cool topic, and they would like to hear more of what we got.
Hell yeah!
Just to spin off of what Chris said, in where I work at, it's like 28 alpha males, and nobody wants to admit nothing. But I put it out there that this is what we did, and let's just say the feedback that I got wasn't like, "Hey, thanks, man, you're saying it." It was more like, "Sup, good stuff." You know what I'm saying? When you have a bunch of alpha male guys, but they're responding and they're watching. That's all I need. That's all I need with those guys. I know how to work with them. I work with them. You don't have to give them much. Communication's understood, and so I found it as a positive.
That's a positive. Definitely positive. That's a guy thing, though. Like that's I'm not allowed to show emotions because my generation said emotions were gay, so we don't do emotions. Right? I'm a real man.
You give me about 15 more minutes. I'm gonna start crying.
Yeah, no, for real. It's
right here.
Especially the younger guys that are in their 20s, like mid 20s to like 28. Those guys are in a real world of like, well, I'm not married. I don't have all this stuff. So they're kind of in that vulnerable state where like, am I a man or am I just like living out of the back of my truck and like jumping on airplanes type deal? Like, right, they're transitioning to, and they don't know how to do it, but they also lack the social skills to talk to ladies. So,
a bunch of guys.
Right. It's just kind of funny. They're fine with a bunch of guys in the woods for 2 weeks, but we can't talk about other things like mental health. So it was good. It was good received. So.
It's such a scary topic.
Yeah, I was afraid of it.
It is until you do it. So I don't know about you guys, but like it's like a magical magnifying mind, right? Like I'll think about talking about my feelings. I'll think about something that's bothering me or an issue, or maybe I'm feeling emotional or whatever the case may be. And then I'll compound so much shit on top of I'll make up so many different scenarios in my head why it's not going to go the way I think it's going to go, or it's not going to be, it'll fall on deaf ears. And it just seems that more times than not for me, when I've jumped off the ledge and actually talked about it, it's been successful. Right. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. And it's just, I just think it's one of those things where you just got to give it a go, man. And it's, for me, the moment that I really started doing that and realizing the success of it it felt silly for not doing it earlier.
Yeah. So I have one statement and a question from your statement. One, I feel like you don't really notice that it's really good until you have your first success, right?
Right.
If that makes any sense. Like your first, because as soon as you open that door, you have chaos and you feel like things actually got worse. But then once you get to a point where you're like, oh, I actually think I'm a little healed from that one particular scenario.
Yeah.
Now I see the value. And then my question is, any of those scenarios you imagine, has it ever turned out to be any one of them?
No.
Exactly. It turns out to be such a waste of time, right? You're spinning your wheels, coming up with all these scenarios, and then not a single one of them even comes true.
And even to this day, right? Like I know better, but even to this day, I'll still do that. I'll have those moments where I'm like, I really should talk to him, or I really should talk to her, or I really should have brought that up. And then I'll compound all the things that all the doubt, all the fear, and I've always been proved wrong. None of that has ever been proved right. I've never had it backfire, and I've been like, fucking knew it, right? Like that's never happened. But even to this day, I still suffer from that. I still deal with it.
Oh, yeah.
I think for me too, like I spent a lot of my like teenage into adulthood years just thinking like this is normal. Like this is how people deal with this stuff. Like you don't talk to people about it. It's like I always just thought like this is what my dad deals with. This is what my gunny deals with. This is what my boss deals with. Like they all have the same feelings. They all have the same problems, and I don't hear them complaining about it. So I'm not going to complain about it either. It took a long time to realize like we are all dealing with problems, but like not everybody's dealing with the same problems. And to help with that, like talk to your friends. Talk to your friends. That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's that like it sucks too, because like I was talking to a friend today and he said that he got out of an appointment and like at the end of his appointment, like he felt dirty about it. Like he like
Yeah.
like you know, and it doesn't feel good. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel good to like drag all this emotional crap out. But by the end of it, you know, it does feel good. It's like once you meditate on it and once you like think about it for a little bit and kind of work through it a little bit, it's definitely like a weight off your shoulders.
Well, it's like kind
It
of going
feels-
back to what Jonathan said, is it's like it'll feel dirty, it'll feel yucky until you realize the success from it, and then you'll
Yeah.
feel silly for feeling that way.
The stigma's there, and then we get punished for actually coming out and doing it sometimes, though. And I think that's where it comes from. Like, I honestly think my marriage took a dip when I chose to finally be vulnerable 7 years in or 6 years in. For the first time ever, I was like, you know what? I'm going to actually address something that I need to address instead of me becoming a workaholic who's got his head down, goes to work for 12 hours, comes home, does 5 house projects, then takes care of the kid before bed, and then goes to sleep. Right, trying to be a partner, it was just torture. And then one time I chose to do it, and I kind of felt like my wife never looked at me the same after that. So it crushed me, but at the same time, it's like, really know if that was really the issue or if I was just myself that.
So that's the fear with most men in relationships, right? Because we always see this, you'll see it on TikTok or Facebook or whatever, like what women want. They want the stoic man who like doesn't show emotion. When you show emotion, she cheats on you and leaves on you, and she thinks you're weak, right? But like, find a stronger woman, right? Like when I sat down with my wife, and like I have that fear too. Like, don't get me wrong, right? Like I had that fear bringing it to my wife. Like she's gonna look at me like I'm weak or I'm not strong. But once I did, and she understood like what I was trying to say and why, like, then she pieced it together and she was like, well, now what are you going to do about it? You know what I'm saying? And that's like, I'm sorry, Jonathan, but like, I understand you went through some pain and some shit with that, but now you get to go and find a better, stronger person. Right. And,
I've
and
found a stronger support.
Right. We've learned lessons from that, right? Like be honest and upfront out from the gate, and if they can handle it, then they stick around, right? Like I honestly feel like me being honest with my wife has made me stronger in our relationship, because I still struggle with it. Like I'm not perfect, but like I feel right now that if I pulled my wife in here and sat her down and be like, vomited on her. It was like, here it is. Like she's gonna hold me, she's gonna tell me it's okay, and then she's gonna be like, okay, now what are we gonna do? You know what I'm saying?
Awesome.
Like she's a trooper, dude. Like, but that's a fear that men have, right? Is just what you said. Like, well, if I tell them this, then they're not gonna stick around. I'm sorry to tell you, it doesn't matter. if she doesn't stick around through that, she wasn't going to stick around for the long haul anyway, right?
Mhm.
And like that's hard for especially young guys to process when they're all in their fields and they're all in love, right? If you can't be honest with your wife or your partner, right? If you can't be honest with them and tell them how you're feeling, then that's not the one for you, right? Like
Mhm.
you need to take care of yourself before you can ever take care of a partner or a family. And I mean, that's just, I know I'm going through it. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm going through it right now. So like it's a little raw for me, but we need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of, our families.
Oh.
And that's both husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, whatever that dynamic looks
Whoever
like.
your partner is.
I was gonna say that was really good. He hit the hammer on the nail. Perfect. No, I deal with the same thing. I waited so long to get married because of that factor. I'd seen I had so many examples of my mentors and seeing that I didn't want to be in this field and have to deal with that, so I strayed away. And then I found one, lucky me, but I had to wait a long time, but you know what? Time's what I got.
Right.
So, and there also is like a right way to do that, right? And that's something that I had to learn the hard way. And so, what I mean by that is like, you're really stressed out, you're depressed, you're anxious, or whatever, right? And then, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of the times that I would finally talk about my emotions is when I would have like a little snap, right? Life got a little too hard. It came out in an argument. I was upset when I did it. And that I always found was like the absolute wrong way to do that. And that was the thing that taught me about it was like I I I would always thought that I told women, right? Like I thought I told her how I felt. I thought I told her what was bothering me. I thought I told her all those things. And the truth was, I didn't tell her those things. I yelled at, me and her would be yelling at each other, and I'd be telling her that. And there was never a chance that she was ever going to be receptive of what I was saying if she had to be defensive about it, right? If I gave her a reason to be defensive. And it was something to where it was really simple. We had a conversation one time. And she said, "Why don't you just the next time you're going through something like that, just bring it up to me and tell me what you're going through." And so I immediately was like, "I already do that, and that I've done that before. It didn't work." And she was like, "You've never told me. You've never told me." And so
Yeah.
I had to give it a shot, and holy shit, it worked. There's a right and a wrong way to do it, I think.
Yeah. So actually, that I was an explosive anger person as well. I don't know if that's what you were describing, the explosive anger. I was an explosive anger person for a long time, and I came to realize that actually the reason I was exploding was because I had no idea what the hell was going on or how to handle what I was dealing with. So
Yeah.
I was exploding. I was doing what I knew how to, which was knuckle dragging and fighting. Right? I knew how to smash things. So I was like, how do I get all this anger out? Smash! Ah! Punch holes in walls, right? I was a Chad or a Kevin or what do you call it? Like the guy who punches holes.
Chad, Kyle,
Chris. But I started asking myself, why am I always exploding? Why am I always like losing my shit? I have these giant ups, I have these really deep downs, and then I have these bounce backs to really figure things out. And then when I started doing the therapy stuff and started diving into it, I started realizing I was exploding because I didn't know how to do. I didn't know how to handle what I was dealing with. I had emotions that didn't make sense to me. Like I'm not supposed to be weak and sad and want to cry for 3 straight days. Right? After my divorce, I spent 4 days in a beanbag chair. I got up to go to the bathroom and grab food from the refrigerator and went back and ate it in the beanbag chair. And I like cried for, I swear to God, 8 hours of every day. Like it was just depressing, but I had no idea how to handle anything I was dealing with. And then I also find because that enlightened me, realizing that my explosive response was because I didn't know what to do. It made me realize that the poor responses I was getting from other people, you try to bring something to them, they either tell you to man up, or they don't want to deal with that conversation, or they say, hey, you need to go get help, like, or I'm not one to talk, or they're not nearly as supportive as you want them to be, or they come back and belittle you for what you're doing. Most of the time, it's because they don't know what to fucking do with the emotions either.
That's a fact. I've had
You almost feel
many
sorry for him.
conversations.
You
Well,
almost
I've
feel
had-
sorry for him.
Yeah.
Like I've had people, you know, at work come to me and start talking to me about stuff. I'm like, I don't know what to do with that emotion. Like, and I'll tell them, like, I don't know what that emotion is, you know, like, because I'm not equipped. I'm not a therapist. You know, I've never been to school for that, you know. Like, I don't know how to handle when someone comes to me with that kind of stuff. I don't know what I'm doing in my own life. Like you know, I can empathize with you, right? But I can't, you know, I can't. A lot of the times, it's hard for me to be able to like give good, solid advice in that situation. You know, like one thing I try to refrain from is man up, right? Like I try really hard to refrain from that, but I also like I will give advice to the best of my ability, and most of the time it's I find like a little solution in there, right? Like for instance, like hey, maybe cut back on your drinking. If you need help with that, then we can talk about that because I have avenues for that. Or you know, hey, like I know that you're a veteran. Like, have you been back to the VA? Right? Like, have you been doing the stuff that they've lined out for you to do? Like, that's the stuff that I try to do. I'm not the best at it a lot of times, but like one thing I try to refrain from saying is man up, unless it's like to one of my female, you know, employees. I tell them to man up all the time because it drives them nuts.
So I have a question.
I think the man up statement is more of a short term resolve of like, hey, we're in the middle of something, man up for now, and then address it, opposed to man up for life. That's just.
So I have a question for you guys. I have a question for you guys on that. You know, the man up or pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or all those, you know, shitty little slogans, sayings that people say. Like, so I get that. Just for the sake of argument, the statement "man up" is very much turning into like a toxic term where people are basically saying like nobody cares about your emotions, do your job. But also like there is the caveat that like if you're being a bad man, like you might need some tough love. I respond much better to tough love a lot of times than I do to being coddled. And for me, like, I don't remember who I was talking to, but I said something like, you can't hold other people to your standards. And they said, yes, you can. And that made me realize, like, if somebody's coming to me with a problem, but it's a self-inflicted problem, like, yeah, your wife's mad at you because you work for 6 hours a day, you don't contribute anything to the house, you go home, you walk into your office, you close the door, you play video games, you don't talk to your kids, like you're completely checked out of your family, like your wife has a right to be mad at you. So is there an appropriate time to say, maybe not necessarily say man up, but is there appropriate time for the people in our lives to say like, hey, you're not doing your part, you're not living up to your responsibility in this relationship?
It absolutely, and like
I would say that's a man the fuck up thing, right? Like that's how I would respond to it. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like you're right. There is time when you definitely need to tell an individual to man the fuck up, right? Like you're living below your standard first off, right? Like you're holding somebody or something to the standard that you can't obtain yourself, right? Like you need to man up and realize that your expectations are premeditated resentments and do your job, right? Whether that's, to, dig line, pay bills, take care of the kids, whatever that is, like you need to handle your shit, man up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, tighten your panties, whatever it is.
It's hard.
So where do you think the line is on that? Where does the change go from tough love to toxic toxic expectations or toxic
So those
toxicity?
it's for those individuals that come to you with who's always coming to you with a problem and no solution, right? And then you start trying to help them out, and you realize that their problems are mainly self-inflicted, and they're not doing anything to right those wrongs, right? That's for me, like that's when it's hey, you just need to man up, right? Take responsibility, take responsibility for your actions, right your wrongs, say your piece and carry on.
Yeah, see that.
I say it that way, but there's more tactful ways. There's more tactful ways to do that.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, man up is a very vague statement. I feel like if you need to say man up to somebody, depending on the context of the situation, it most likely needs to be dove into. Because if they're repeatedly coming to you with problems and no answers, they may just be an idiot and may have never been exposed to the information they needed to learn in order to man up. You're motivated idiot. That's why.
I have a good. So I kind of have a structure how I go. I have to deal with that a lot with folks, and it's generally age dependent. But sometimes at first when a guy would bring a problem to me, I didn't know how to react or what to. I would think like, okay, I need to have command presence, whatever. And then I slowly, as it developed and it kept happening, I was like, okay, I just need to be an ear at first. I need to listen, because sometimes they can handle it just by listening and going for a walk. Let those guys vent. I be the ear, pass no judgment, get comfortable, and that worked like 80% of the time. But the reoccurring issues with people, I would start to develop a plan. Like, okay, he knows what to do. He knows what he has to do. Does he want to hear it from me? Instead of saying man up, if after the fourth time and we have to go for a walk and I'm the ear and they ask me for advice, whatever, I won't give them any advice. I'd be like, you know what you need to do. It's right in front of you. You just got to do it. Apply. Be motivated. Do it. Get it done. It'll be behind you. And you know what? I was like, dang, why do we have human resources? I could just take guys out in the woods and just be like, hey, pay me human resources pay, No. I learned that from an HR person that I talked to. It's like sometimes being the ear at first to get a foundation, but if it's reoccurring, they know, especially from the ages of 25 to 32, they know what they have to do. They just don't want to commit to it, So
I think it is, to go off of like what Chris was saying and answering a little bit of Ham, is where I think that's acceptable is when you can see that the person wants you to either go sign their bullshit or they're just sitting in their comfort zone, right? They don't want to get out of their comfort zone for the solution to their answer, right? And you can see that, and it's something that I call them assholes. So they're going to ask you for some help, and they're not going to listen to anything you say, right? And so if you see somebody that's not willing to get out of their comfort zone for a solution that they need, that's a man the fuck up statement, right? Like for me at least. And it's just, for the hardest thing for me to deal with in my 20s, it was, I was so fucking lazy that I did, and it wasn't like I didn't get shit done or I didn't get shit done around the house or do what I was supposed to. It was, I would never do the hard stuff emotionally or the uncomfortable stuff that would better my situation, I would just sit in my comfort zone. And because, like what Jonathan was saying earlier, I smashed everything, and that's how I fixed everything, right? My whole life. And when you're a father and you're a man to a woman, it's you can't just smash fucking everything. And that's something that I had to learn. And the biggest thing that I had to learn for myself, and when you learn it yourself, you kind of can see the signs really easily. Is people just don't want to get out of their comfort zones, right? They want an easier, softer way. And a lot of the times that the most blossoming, the best things that can happen don't come easy and they don't come soft, right? And so in that instance, that's a man the fuck up thing.
Well, that's why I never give me the answer. They know the answer.
Yeah.
I won't tell them that. They know what to do. If they've met with me that many times, they know. I know.
Yeah.
I can just give them a look. You know what to do. Just do it. Just do it.
How many times do I have to tell you?
Just do it.
Yeah, my first time that my anger response really hit home was I got angry in front of my wife and kid one time. I wasn't angry at them. I was angry at something else, but I got angry and I smashed something, and the petrified look that my 2-year-old gave me at the time, I was like, what the fuck? I just do as a dad. I need to leave. Like, I need to leave the house. I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do? And at that point on, I was like, I can't have a smashing mentality anymore. I need to address things. And I'm a huge research nerd. So I started going and spending hours and hours at night going like, why am I angry? Why do I hate myself? Why is depression and sadness and anxiety is an easy place to get to and a hard place to get out of. It feels like anyway. Because once you're in. You're like, oh, chaos, chaos, chaos. Okay, I don't want that chaos anymore. And then as soon as that chaos is gone, you're like, life's not
building it.
Like chaos. That's not comfortable. I'm used to all the chaos. Where's my chaos?
Yeah, that's a real thing in a lot of mental health diagnoses also. I'm diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. And when you start taking medication and start going through therapy, like for me, and I've read this, that this is for the same for a lot of people, is you start to get worried that like you're going to lose your sense of self by fixing these issues. That like you see these issues, but you're going to lose who you are by fixing these issues. So it's a really, really hard place to like you said, it's a hard place to get out of, but it's a really easy place to go into.
Mm-hmm.
And like the horrible thing is with a lot of people, myself included, I was actually talking to Chris about this earlier, whether we are growing or not, there's a thing where like sometimes this is a figure of speech. So like I'll be depressed or I'll be anxious about something, and I look at it like you're shitting your pants, you're shitting your own pants, and you're sitting in it complaining about it, right? Like, man, you get comfortable feeling the way that you do, right? And that's why, to kind of build off what Jonathan was saying, depression is so sneaky and so powerful. It'll creep up on you, sometimes really, really gradually. And then before you know it, you're fully enthralled in depression, right? And now you're stuck there because that's where you're comfortable, right? And a lot of people don't understand that. It is tough, man. It's really sneaky and it's really tricky. So I just had to get that out.
Sorry, the whole time you were talking, Lucas, I was watching like one of those, I can't remember that douchebag's name, the kickboxer guy.
Tate.
Someone help me out.
Andrew Tate.
Andrew Tate. Yeah. They didn't have depression back in the day, like, and, like, like that's a whole, that like depression, especially amongst males, is a whole nother stigma that, I would like to fight, because it's like Lucas said, it's sneaky and it hits hard and it's easy to get into and hard to come out of. And I don't want to get into statistics of, all that, but the suicide rate for, especially veterans and firefighters is super high. Right. And it's, I can't. It's hard. It's hard to go to your boss or to your partners or your
Fucking
wife
terrifying.
and be like I'm depressed, right? Like, well, why are you depressed? I don't fucking know how I got here. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's the scary thing, right? And it's hard for a lot of us. It's hard to know the signs and symptoms of depression, right? Because it's different in everybody, right? So like, I'm not even sure I know what all the signs and symptoms of depression is, because when I think of it, I'm like, oh, laying in bed, not doing anything, right? But like, that's not that ain't it. You know what I mean? It's not crying in your bed at night. It's not.
Well, it's not that it's not it. It's not that it's just that.
Right.
It's not. You can't put it in a box, is what I'm trying to say, right? Like those are all things, but like it can come out as you're not feeling motivated to do the things that you used to love to do, right? You're not hanging out with the friends that you used to love to hang out with. You're not involved with your family the way that you used to be, right? Like you start to withdraw a little bit and you're just like, you know what, I'm just tired, right? Like I don't want to go out, and hang out with my buddies. I don't want to go out and, have a conversation with my son. I don't want to do those things, right? And like that's what a lot of us miss. We miss those signs of depression, and we pack it into, I had a hard day at work, right? Like I'm just tired, I'm exhausted. And like I think it's important that even if you don't feel you have depression, to get on the old Googler and start looking up signs and symptoms of depression and make yourself aware. So like you don't only see it, in yourself building up, but you can see it in your friends, your partners, your coworkers, and help them, battle that before they get to a place where, they need more help than just a shoulder or an ear. You know what I'm saying? Like, and like, I'm saying all this stuff, and I'm like, man, I'm not doing that. I'm falling short, right? So like, I'm writing that down because it's important. It's important to me, right? Like with the suicide rate for veteran suicide and firefighter suicide, like just suicide in general, right? Teenage suicide. I think it's important for not only us as friends, partners, parents, bosses, whatever, to be able to help out the people around us, right? I feel like all of us, talking right now, like we all have the ability to help somebody before it reaches that point.
Just talking along.
And if you're listening, jot that down. Like go Google that stuff and start, helping people out, right? Just give them, some advice, like be there to listen. Call them when they don't, if someone calls you every Saturday and they stop calling you, call them and make sure that they're doing okay. Just check their headspace and timing and make sure they're good to go. So
I didn't know. So that reminds me, or makes me want to share, should I say? Partly when I recognized that I was depressed, and then a little snippet about like before even recognizing what depression was. So the first time I truly understood that I was depressed, I had a gun to my head. Right, I was ready to check out. I was ready to go bye-bye, and I was there. I was sitting on my bed, and I was just like, "This is too much. I'm done." And then at that point, I had a little flashback of thinking about how my son's life would be without me, and that really stopped me. And then having some information that actually, here's some information for people who are actually on that way. Don't do it, because one, having a parent who commits suicide increases the likelihood that your children will commit suicide, because you've given them the okay and example to check out without going through the hard work that it takes to suffer to recover. So that was when I realized that I was depressed, was at that point. And that was hard for me to even accept. Even then, I still argued with myself that I wasn't depressed and it was some other issue. Because for me, growing up, I have always been an obnoxiously happy person. Obnoxiously happy. And I actually feel bad because I've had conversations with friends and never understood the depression they were telling me about. And until I finally experienced it for myself, the willingness to get to the point where you're willing to check out, that's dark and deep. And I was blown away that I even got there. But once I understood it, it was just like, wow, now I can understand what real depression is. I had no idea what depression was. So if you ever have anyone come to you and tell you you're depressed, take a step back and listen. Provide no input if you've got real use. Just listen.
Yeah, it's and that's a perfect example of how easy that sneaks up on you. I went through a similar situation where after my ex and I split up years ago, I was still in the Marine Corps. I sat in my living room and I had a shotgun in the corner of my apartment that we went out and shot trap every single weekend. And I was sitting in my living room staring at that shotgun and I'm looking at it and I'm like, tonight I'm either going to pick that thing up and use it on myself or I'm going to get help. And I sat there in the dark, in the silent for, gosh, it felt like an eternity, but for a really long time. And then finally I picked up the phone and the deciding factor was I'm going to call my buddy Reader. And if he picks up the phone, I'll know that I'm making the right choice. Like I left my entire life up to a single phone call. And thank God he picked up the phone and excuse me. When he picked up the phone, like that was that moment of clarity where I was like, I need help. Like thank God he picked up the phone. Like that dude, like he saved my life and I don't even think he knows it. But it's just really scary how quickly and how easily depression can sneak up on you and you not even recognize it. I mean, to this day, you still look back and you're like, oh, well, yeah, I had some stuff going on, you know, but it's scary. So call your friends, call your dad, call your grandpa, call your brother. You know, I don't want to limit this to men's mental health, but that's what our experience is in. You know, so if your friend calls you at 11:30 midnight and that's out of the blue for them, answer the phone. For the love of God, answer the phone.
I have a veteran buddy, Chris, you know, he used to call at 1:00 in the morning, drunk as hell, roaming through the woods with a gun.
Is that the flower?
Yeah.
Is that the flower? Yeah.
So something that I wanted to touch on too is what Kevin was saying. Here's something. So the suicidal thing that I had my best friend killed himself. A few years after that, my sister killed herself, and I was so, and I still am, but so against suicide that it's not something. I don't want our listeners to think that it's just categorized to a certain person, because with me, it came out of nowhere, right? Like I got hurt in a really bad work accident back in 2016, and I went from being the provider in my house to being a stay-at-home dad to being taken care of by my wife, and it wasn't something to where it was something that I was dwelling on every day. The day that I made that decision, threw the pistol on my truck and drove to the end of my road, it wasn't something that I was thinking about the morning. It wasn't something that I was thinking about 2 days before that. It wasn't something that I was thinking about an hour before what triggered the event happened. It just came on. And it was, for me, the only way that I can explain it was I'm a solution finder and a problem solver. And it was the problem that I needed to solve. It was the solution that I needed the solution to. And the only plausible outcome was that I needed to. And I know that doesn't make sense. And at the moment in time, I knew that didn't make sense. But I was so uncomfortable. I was in so much pain that it was literally the only outcome. I have 3 kids that I love more than life itself. I love my family. And it came on, boom. And luckily, I had some divine intervention and I didn't do that. But I woke up the next morning, and I don't know about you guys that's ever experienced something like that, but I was so beyond fucking terrified because it never happened. It was something super surreal. It wasn't something familiar. And I was just terrified that I was even capable of thinking about that. Right.
Yeah.
And so with our listeners, I was the guy that thought, okay, well, I'm going through a depression or I might be down and out. Right. But I'm not going to feel that way. Right. It's not that bad. And it comes out of nowhere. So if you feel like you have some of those signs or you feel like you're down and out, don't think that you're an exception to the rule, because I did and I'm not. And so if you feel that way, like we're all saying, man, get a hold of somebody, talk to somebody. If you've got nobody to talk to, there's 5 people in this group right here that we would love to talk to you. Shoot us a message. It's
So-
there's no doubt not one of us would make sure that you're okay.
We will respond.
And the thing is too, like, you don't have to call and lay out your life story either. Like, just pick up the phone and talk to someone. Pick up the phone and talk to them about your day. Make, just you're missing a connection somewhere. You're in this state of mind and things are getting really dark and really hard. And literally, for me, all it took was for somebody to answer their phone and say, "Hey man, what's up?" That's all it took. It was like a switch that completely like drugged me out of that fog. So, if you're worried that you're inconveniencing someone or that you're just going to talk to somebody and it's going to make it worse, I promise you, you're not inconveniencing them. I promise you that it's not going to make it worse. It's only going to make it better. And if you don't feel like you have anybody that you can call, or you feel weird about talking to somebody personally, because I know that's hard sometimes. Like, there's people in my life, in my family, that I love and respect, that I would never call and be like, "Hey man, I'm having a tough day," just because we don't have that
Right.
kind of relationship. There's and I'm sure we can throw the phone numbers up here post conversation, but not our phone numbers. There's a standard
stuff.
there's a standard suicide hotline and there's a veteran suicide hotline, and those people are great. They can be your ear, they can be your shoulder to cry on. You can unload on them and not have to worry about any like repercussions from a dramatic family member or anything like that. So but my point is, call somebody, talk to someone.
One thing I want to note, I want to add on to your statement is, if you call somebody and for whatever reason you do get a negative response or something that actually makes it worse, don't take that as concrete evidence. Take that as that's somebody else who also needs to understand emotions and deal with their own shit. And you need to call somebody who's just a little stronger than that.
And make that phone call before you get to that point where you're not relying on, you're not relying on God essentially to have somebody answer that phone, and you're not relying on that phone being answered as your answer to this question that you're presenting yourself. If you start feeling these feelings, if you think that you're kind of down and out and you're not feeling very good, like, pick up the phone and call somebody. Go talk to somebody.
So real quick, from my my most recent experience, right? I was going through it, and I'm just going to speak to veterans right now because that's where I'm going through. But I tried numerous different local people to try and get in and see, and like I just got voicemail after voicemail, like emails, text messages, no responses, right? And so I got on the VA webpage, and I couldn't find out. I could not reach anybody at the desk at my local VA, right? And you can always walk into your local VA. You can always walk in, and they'll help you. But I was out in the woods and I didn't have that option. And I couldn't navigate the site. So I called the 1-800, WAN number.
Yeah.
The 1-800, I called the 1-800 crisis line. And that dude I cussed him out and yelled at him. Right. But he stayed on the phone and he talked to me. He emailed them and he stayed with me until I said I was okay for him to hang up. Right. Not that I was suicidal, but I was just overly emotional, exhausted. Right. And I just needed someone to talk to. As soon as I hung up with him, my local VA called me back within 15 minutes, right? And then me just having that phone call with him eased my whole day. And then when I went in, they schedule my appointment for the next day. I went in the next day, and me just sitting in there and talking to them, like I felt gross coming out of there, like just tired, gross, right? But I felt 100 times better walking out than I did walking in, right? And like we didn't even work on anything. And real quick, and then I'll pass it to someone else. Some of the signs and symptoms for the people who are just listening and are driving maybe and can't Google, right? Some of the signs and symptoms: anxiety, apathy, general discontent, guilt, hopelessness, loss of interest or pleasures in activities, mood swings or sadness, early awakening, excessive sleepiness, insomnia or restless sleep, excessive hunger, fatigue, loss of appetite or restlessness, agitation, excessive crying, irritability or social isolation, lack of concentration, slowness in activity or thoughts of suicide, weight gain or weight loss, poor appetite, or repeatedly going over thoughts, right? And that's just some of the signs, right? So you could Google those, and then if you give me just 1 second.
The hard part with that description of those signs and symptoms is they're common everyday instances, right? And like even with depression, one thing I noticed is depression's not every day. Like one day you'll be happy, the next day you're even more depressed. Well, you're happier than you were when you were depressed, but then you'll be happy, depressed, happy, and you'll go through these waves and cycles. But to me, it always felt like a roller coaster. So it was when those symptoms start interfering with your life is when I think they're really prominent.
Right. So, real quick, I'm sorry. I just want to plug this.
No, go ahead.
Real quick. 988 is the suicide crisis lifeline. I urge you, I know the phone is going to feel like a brick, and I know it's going to be super heavy and hard to pick up. But last resort, if you can't call a friend or a family member or a loved one and have that conversation, 988 is the suicide crisis lifeline.
I'll add it to the screen when this episode goes out, so it's also on the screen for everyone to see.
And this got
what
like
a good episode. I just want to say that.
Yeah. So I was to say this got like super deep, a little bit dark. But there are things that you can do. Like your mental health is exactly like your physical health, and if you don't maintain it, it gets bad. And mental health and physical health, they go hand in hand. So, it's important. Like for me, I'm stuck in a truck for 12 hours a day. Well, not always 12, sometimes 8, sometimes 16. You never really know. So it's important for me. I make it a point, like if nothing else, I'm going to get out of my truck and I'm going to go walk for 20 or 30 minutes and just, like it doesn't have to be exercise necessarily, but you need to get outside of your, somebody referred to me as a cave. Like when you're in a depressive state, you build a cave for yourself, whether that's your game room at your house, your bedroom, for me, the truck, whatever, your phone, your hands on your phone all the time. Like you like getting out and getting sunlight and fresh air is super important. Exercise is super important. Doing things outside your, picking up your phone and calling that person, super important. Like there are things that you can do to that you should be doing to, especially if you're prone to these things, to keep up with your mental health the same way that you would keep up with your physical health, including like, eating healthy and, not drinking a bunch of energy drinks just to make it through the day, and like all that stuff that affects your physical health can also affect your mental health. So try and work on that. If you're, even, I mean, if you're not prone to these things, this probably isn't super relevant to you, but if you are prone to these, anxiety disorders and depressive disorders and that sort of stuff, do some, work on the back end and set yourself up for success. Set yourself up so you don't get to that point to where you have to make that phone call. You're at that point to where you can make that phone call because that's part of your routine.
So real quick, we are not doctors. Okay, we're not therapists. We're just a group of dudes who are trying to bring awareness towards a topic that we're passionate about, right? So whatever that means to you, take with a grain of salt.
Yeah. So yeah, we're giving you advice. We're giving you the information that has either worked or didn't work for us, and hoping that it will provide you with something more than nothing. So this is actually one of the things I think a lot of, well, there's some routine stuff I want to mention, but then I also want us to talk about one of the reasons why talking about this stuff is not general, like people don't go out and say, hey, you know what, let's work on this to work on your mental health so much, because I feel like everyone's afraid to give bad advice. Or you give advice and then you get somebody who shows up and says, hey, you know what, that's not the way it needs to be done, or that didn't work for me and this worked for that. One thing I just want to emphasize is that there's not a one fit all answer for any of this.
Aggie, I'm going to throw you on the spot, man. What do you got? Like for your mental health, what is it that you do? I mean, I know the answer, but I want to hear from you.
You do know the answer, and that's this is probably one of the things when we were talking earlier about how hard it is for people to admit that they need help and what they do. I'm one of those characters that has a hard time admitting, there's things that I need for my mental health, and jiu-jitsu is one of them. So I know a lot of folks have seen like therapists, and and I haven't. And with my background, it's always been a sport deal, a team deal, whether it be wrestling or football or baseball. I was always active in a team-oriented thing, and Forest Service allowed me to be team-oriented as well. But I found that I had the same issues in the Forest Service as I did with all my other teams, whether it be I'm not the guy that they want, but I'm a guy that can do the job, and which is what I felt a lot. And so for me with wrestling, I hated wrestling, and I hated it my whole life, but I did it, and then I missed it. And since I started jiu-jitsu, it's one of the things that I realized for me that is I actually seek that physical violence. I want to say, to be able to compete. Like I need my release. They ran me in the Forest Service. I did push-ups and sit-ups, and I did all the calisthenics, and that wasn't enough to keep me not from falling back into what you guys had said, like the depression kind of modes. And I was like feeling like self-worth, like, yeah, I'm doing these great numbers over here, but I'm not feeling, for me, I wasn't feeling validated. I didn't feel mentally healthy. And you guys brought up all great comments about being snappy, being fiery. I've been all those, bringing your frustrations home and not communicating them well. And that's a big thing with me, with my wife. I never communicated them well. I would just yell or just be like, ah. As soon as I started jiu-jitsu and got hands-on into a point where I could control that, it's like I want to say it's like a controlled violence, because I'm not trying to hurt somebody. I'm just trying to compete and be better. It has helped me. I had a end of the season evaluation, and people were like, dude, you're so much happier this year. And I was like, whoa, was I not happy before? Like, how do you guys, I thought this whole year I was doing the same thing. They're like, I don't know what you've been doing, but for me, I think the release is that physical like competition. The younger me at 28 would be like, yeah, I want to dominate this guy and smash him. But now I'm just like, I'm wanting to like better myself, and that's kind of where I wouldn't say I'm afraid to seek like therapy or whatnot. I kind of hold myself back, which is another fault. People will hold themselves back and think that they don't need it because they're not qualified enough to ask for that help. So that made me really think today before coming on here. I had all day to think about at work was like what's it gonna hurt for me to call and see like, hey, this is what I don't everything we've mentioned, all the signs. I've been using jiu-jitsu to help me stay focused for work, calm me down before I show up. I might not like what managers have in store for me that day, but I still comply. But after a while, that if they're not doing the right thing, they're just being dumb. And we all know, we've all worked for guys like that. Yeah. I've blown up on them before and made a scene and be like, you guys are just dumb, but I appreciate the fact that this group is here. It's grown for me. I've grown from it just in the short time. And Chris knows. It's kind of funny because he'll know when I have some issues, and it's like a sentence. Be like, it won't even be like a real communicated sentence, but he'll know. He's like, he's dealing with some stuff. And same with Chris. We go to jiu-jitsu. He's like, how's work? And he'd be like, yeah, and he'll ramble, but I won't hear it. But he's dealing with some stuff. So, for me,
and then we go real hard.
Yeah, and I think it's, to be honest with you, as a kid, I was the same way. That's why my family got me into wrestling at such a young age, because I was just, there was something that I was an emotional kid. I always thought what's right was right, and I had to fight for what was right, but I didn't know what was right because I was being built as an individual, and so I thought some other person's right might be my wrong. I don't even know back then, but I would be like, that's wrong, and then I'd be like, let's wrestle. But for me, I think it's the whole fact that I mentioned before. Like, you don't have to limit yourself to the help, and I think I limit myself because I think that my problems aren't good or low enough to ask for that. But they are. They're just like everybody else. It's like we've said, everybody's issues are individually, and depression affects them differently. And so I could just be in a different spectrum of that, but it's still the same. It's still depression. And at the end of the fire seasons, my wife really noticed it. It really hits me hard, where I don't know how to like act, and so. Yeah. But I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate the intel given out and exposing some stuff for me.
No, and Brian, like that's great, right? Because like, only 3 of us are veterans, right? And then you and I have our careers, and then Lucas is out there being a gangster boo, doing his thing, right? Right? Like, but like, it doesn't, like, we've had numerous conversations about this, right? I'm sorry, there's a net in here. We've had numerous conversations about this, right? And there's not, like we mentioned earlier, there's not one way. You don't need to go. Not everybody needs to go see a therapist, or call the hotline, or like you, for instance. I'm, like you said, I can see when like you're getting to a point where something's dragging you down, and like that's when you turn it on, right? Like you grind, and like you're like, I'm going to be a little late because I'm running today, and you're like, I ran 10 miles or whatever crazy number you throw out. You intensify your training, right? And then you pick up extra training on the side, and like that's how. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like those are healthy ways of maintaining your mental health, and like that's why I like the group that we have. Kind of, I hear you.
I want to throw 2 cents there because I actually did this myself. I learned when I went to my PTSD therapy was I hyper focused on work for years. I want to say 7 to 8 years of just like, no, I gotta work. I gotta work. I'm always working. I gotta work. I gotta work, and then I'm gonna work out. And like, no, I don't have time to face my mental issues because I got work, and I use that as an excuse. So,
Well,
just
so
to,
I think
That's what I'm getting at.
I think the difference there is that you, and I'm speculating here, but it sounds like you dove into your work as a way to avoid your mental health issues, whereas it sounds like Brian dives into his routines, his running, his jujitsu, and that kind of stuff as a way to amplify his mood, to bring him out of a depression so that he can work through things. So I definitely hear what you're saying, because I do that too. I dive into work if I don't want to deal with something. I'm like, oh, I got to go to work. See ya. I don't want to deal with it. But
I can tell you right now, being with Brian on like after a 14-day assignment, he comes back and he hasn't trained for 14 days. He's a little moody.
So physical touch actually releases oxytocin, and oxytocin makes you feel better, right? If I'm correct, yeah. Actually, your description of what makes you feel better, I've actually noticed this in my son during the divorce, right? So my son's 6, and we've been divorced since he was 4. And I've noticed that, like, when he spends big chunks with mom's not a wrestler. Mom doesn't like to fight. She doesn't like the physical stuff. But whenever I get my son, he'll be quiet, reserved. Like, you kind of tell he's got something going on mentally. But you get him to wrestle, and he opens up. By the end of the wrestling, he's talking and sharing his emotions. But I think it has a lot to do with the physical, like, the actual touching and bumping and all of that stuff. I think it's just part of being a guy. Like, bucks fucking cling their antlers in order to shave them and stuff, and it's part of their own nature. I think it's part of human nature for men to like want to fight and actually be part of things. And I also think it also comes down to community too, like having your group of people.
We're the other guys.
Yeah, I did grow up in a community where wrestling was really big, starting from like kindergarten all the way through high school. That was like wrestling was the community. Like you didn't do you did baseball. That was like a low level little league baseball. But if you were on like the Cubs wrestling team and all the way through, that's I was indoctrinated. Like I was trained. That's I had my highs and lows at a young age at that. So I've kind of, assimilated that with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Do you still feel like it's really hard to talk about everything?
Oh yeah. Super hard. Yeah. I find myself being the ear.
Conversation. Sorry.
I find myself being the ear more than, like I said, I'll never give advice that I feel that I've never been there before, but if I know the answer and they know the answer, I'll kind of lead them to that way. But for me, like guys know, my close friends know. I only have a few of them, but they know, when there's something going on. It could be also a generational thing too. Me being my age compared to the younger guys that I work with, and I'm still, competing with them. They'll just ask me, and I'll just be like, oh, I'm good, and they'll just look at me and then I'll just wink, like, you got me. We'll talk about it later in the woods or something. But I do have some support, which is nice. But yeah, it is really, really hard to talk about and discuss.
Yeah, I've noticed it doesn't come down from generations above us either. So like one thing I've noticed, so I just went home recently. My mom got injured, so I went home to see her. And my mom's been dealing with some illnesses stuff, and I'm sitting there watching my father basically watch her just deteriorate, right? So he's dealing with it in his own way. She's dealing with it in her own way. And one thing I realized after watching him and like watching my whole after being out of the state, I've been out of the state and away from the family for a long time, and coming back and watching everyone interact. And after spending the last 2 years basically like going through therapies and finding my way through this journey, I went back and realized I was like, my parents aren't exactly aware of how to deal with their own emotions. And I can see it resembled and repeated in my sister, who's handling things the same way they are. When I'm like, I see these scenarios and instances where I'm like, there's a much better way that this could all be handled, or at least reflected on and worked on. But it made me realize that the generations above us don't know what the hell they're talking about either. I think we should have a little talk about. Before I chose to go get help or do anything, I was like, I'm going to do it myself kind of guy. I'm going to go fix my own problems. Let me see if I can fix them. And I think what we're about to talk about would be a really good point for people who either refuse to go get help. We're not telling you information to say, hey, don't get help. We're saying, here's some stuff that we did on our own that helped a lot, like softer things like Kevin was just saying, like how did you say that a second ago?
So it was just and I was probably honestly, because I consume so much media because I'm stuck in a truck all day. It was probably a podcast about somebody talking about the book that you have, Chris. But basically it said if you start your day off with 3 accomplishments every single day, you'll see an improvement in your mental health. And the accomplishments were like, get up when your alarm goes off, don't hit the snooze button, make your bed, and get dressed. Like just those 3 things can be a huge uptick in the quality of your life.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I bought that book for my wife because like I have a thing where like I have to, and it's probably the military, right? But like I have to make my bed, right? It's the first, if my wife's not in it, like I get up, I get in the shower, I come out and I make my bed, right? If I don't make my
angles or just
no,
get on the bed,
I make it look nice.
Yeah.
I don't do the 45 anymore. My bed's crazy comforter, but the book's actually, it's a really good book written by a Navy SEAL. I can't remember his rank, but he was a Navy SEAL, and he wrote a book about it. It's a fairly small book. It's a quick read. I recommend.
I've seen the book.
Yeah.
So what's the name of the book?
I want to say it's Make Your Bed.
We have the internet right here. Let's see. Let's check.
It's called Make Your Bed by William McRaven.
Look at you.
Nice. So one of the things that really, the same thing, finding a routine was actually one of the biggest things. So actually, let me preface this statement before I go into it. When I'm in an emotional state, I shut down completely. I suck at work. I suck at life. I suck as a human being when I'm emotionally broken. Like I don't function well at all. I shut down. It's horrible. So I fail a lot of things. And like as I was trying to climb my way out of this hole, I started getting obsessed with Jordan Peterson a while back. And I was listening to Jordan Peterson, one of his lectures from one of his college lectures that he was giving students. And he was talking about there's studies that are connected. If you're waking up after 9 a.m. in the morning, there's actually studies that connect that you're higher rated for a chance of depression waking up after 9 a.m. And then he goes on in the same lecture to talk about The best thing you can do for keeping your hormones balanced, because your sleep schedule will dictate a lot of your hormone releases. We can get into the science of that on another day. I have to take notes before we head into that conversation. But the biggest key is to go to bed and wake up at the same time as much as possible. If you're a night shifter, same thing. Just have a fixed routine schedule, because your body works in a cyclic system. And when you set up these routines, X number of hours after you go to sleep, you have a hormone release. X number of hours of waking up, you have another hormone release and all that stuff. So if your sleep schedule is out of whack, your emotions are most likely going to be messed, right? You're going to be extra stressed. You'll probably be extra angry or whatnot. One of the quickest ways I've seen the best results in is to just go to bed at the same time every night and then wake up at the same time every morning. And I suck at going to bed every night. So what I would do when I needed to set a bedtime schedule for myself, I'd set an alarm. I was trying to aim and go to bed at 9 p.m. every night. I'd set an alarm for 8 p.m. At 8 p.m., I would take a swig of NyQuil. And then about 9 p.m., I had that extra level of drowsy, so I'd be out. And then after about a week or two of doing this, is probably a horrible routine and super unhealthy, but it fixed me. It like put me into a routine, because once I was frequently for 2 weeks straight at the same time, I just stopped taking NyQuil, and I was already tired by 9 p.m. because we're habit animals, right? So that was a massive production and like just quality of life, was just having a consistent wake up and bedtime routine. Then it goes into sunlight exposure, was probably the second biggest thing that helped me a lot, was to go out and not look at the sun, but to get bright light, right? If you're up and it's still dark out, you just want to get as bright light as you can. Turn all the lights on in the kitchen or room that you're sitting in and absorb that light. That light will trigger a cortisol release that will actually wake your body up, but it puts you onto a better schedule because your body's completely awake. I don't really know the science behind it. I learned that from Huberman Lab. I fucking love that podcast. But one thing he emphasizes and he talks about in there is the science behind it. But your circadian rhythm is based on the visual of you seeing the contrast of light to dark and dark to light. So what that means is like a bright light doesn't tell your body it's daytime. Darkness doesn't tell your body it's night. Seeing the day go from light to dark tells your body it's becoming night. So now it's time to transition for the night period.
You're a nerd.
I do. I'm super
nerd. You know what though? I see that in real time, because when I have my days where I have to leave at like 2 or 3 in the morning to like, so if I'm doing a short run to like the Bay Area or something, instead of going down the night before and spending the night in the Bay Area, I'll get up at like 2 or 3 in the morning and go down there so I can be there at 7 o'clock delivery time. And I will be dog tired driving down I-5, in my truck, just exhausted, like window down, chewing sunflower seeds, music blasting, everything you do to try and stay awake while you're driving, and then I'll watch the sun come up, and I'll watch it come up. And as soon as the because you get the light, but as soon as the physical sun peaks over the foothills, I'm immediately awake. And there's something about that process of like, it's nighttime, I should be asleep, but as soon as that sun peaks over the hills, I'm awake and I'm fine. I don't feel like I'm nodding off at the wheel anymore.
I've noticed that pulling all-nighters before too. As soon as the sunlight's back out, you're like, oh, I can't go to sleep now. Screw it.
Yeah.
I missed my window.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
You want to tell them about doing 24s, bro?
I just did 24s all last week. Night shifts. And I go to bed at 8:30. I get up at 4. And you know what? What you guys said? I was like, I can't wait for the sun to come up. The whole time. That's what kept me up through the night, monitoring the radio and monitoring the fire. I was like, oh, the sun's going to come up in 2 hours. That's 120 minutes. And I would just like force myself to stay awake while everybody else is sleeping around like burning stumps and stuff, trying to keep warm in like 20-degree weather on a ridge top on the border of California and Oregon. It was awesome. 5,000 foot elevation. No, but I get the sun thing and I get the time.
Is there anything else that you guys do for your own? So I know this is a massive stipulation and it's probably preached upon not to do, but like there's a lot of people who aren't going to go out and get help. They just refuse to do it, right? So like what are some of the things you guys do to deal with things that you're not willing to go get help with yet? That I know obviously we need to cope, but
White knuckle.
right? Oh yeah, just hold on tight. We mentioned it a lot in the last episode, but like for journaling is a massive reliever for dealing with my own emotional problems.
Lifting heavy
So
shit.
I don't know what your guys' backgrounds are and stuff, but for me, I pray and I read my Bible. So that helps me a lot.
So there's a lot to that, right? That prayer and meditation. And Lucas kind of knows where I'm going with this, but it doesn't have to be to a God. If that like
Yes.
how do I say this? I'm not saying like you need to go and find, God or,
you don't need to become a Christian.
You don't
Just
need
a
to
higher
become a Christian or a Buddhist, but just a higher power, something that's greater than yourself, right? And like for a lot of people that I know, they would go and use something like the ocean, right? And they would sit on the beach and talk to the ocean, or they would make it up, right? And they would use that higher power and they would talk to it, and ask for guidance and have them, go through the day. And just like we've said through this whole thing today, is like establishing that pattern. Like I was instructed to put my shoes underneath my bed. So when I got up in the morning, I had to get on my knees. And while I'm on my knees, I might as well pray. Right. And I don't do that anymore. But when I first started getting sober, that is something that I had to do every single day. Right. And I made that a habit. And then, unfortunately I've stopped doing that. But it was funny to me, like putting my shoes underneath my bed and then like getting out of bed and then like going to get my shoes and be like, shit. And it's just simple prayer is what I would pray, right? And it's the it's the sobriety prayer. I don't want to touch it. We can do that later, but the serenity prayer. So just little stuff like that. And the St. John prayer like was my crutch when I was going through emotional turmoil. I would get that on my phone and I would read it over and over and over again until I went to sleep, right? And then like study it, right? Like where can I be the light where there's darkness, right? Where can I be the joy when there's discontent, right? Like, and then pick those out and then try to do those throughout the day, right? And it's just a routine, right?
Yeah.
And it's catapulting yourself in a different direction. Instead of looking at poor me, I'm looking at someone else and how I can help them, how I can be of service to them, and being of service. And this is all AA stuff, okay? This isn't stuff that I come up with, right? But being of service to your fellows is the best way to get out of self, right? Now, unfortunately, we do have to work on self, right? So there's that. But those are quick, easy ways to like not feel like it's the end of the world or that impending doom or like, I'm worthless.
Yeah, just don't use that to stuff, right? Like it's really, really, at least for me, it's really, really easy to get into service and kind of just push what I've got, all my shit, what I've got going on to the side. And it's like what Chris is saying, you still got to work on yourself, right? So these are little itty bitty things that are going to help you in a time of need when you maybe can't get help. Those are things to look at. It's not going to be a permanent fix.
Yeah. I actually, during my divorce first started and I was having a lot of the big downfalls of everything, the Bible started showing up for me. And I grew up Catholic, but after my first communion, I basically never went to church again until like I was in the Marine Corps. And then at one point, at random points, I would just be like, you know what? I need to go to church. I'd go to church, or I'd tag along with other people's and go to their churches to see what their religions were about. But when my divorce occurred, I basically getting these signs to read the Bible. But so I picked up the Bible and I was like, you know what? I want to understand this thing better anyway, because I had a huge concentration at the time. My New Year's resolution was to articulate better and to communicate better, right? So I wanted to be able to understand things, and it required reading good literature. And one thing like Jordan Peterson was pointing out is if you want to read good literature, the Bible's a great place to start. So coincidentally, the Bible showed up in my life and I started reading through it, and I was impressed at how much things seemed to be. The readings I were reading had nothing to do with anything that I was going through, but reading it somehow made me feel better. I don't really understood it, but it brought a sense of peace some days when there was just nothing else that was bringing peace.
That's the word of God, my dude.
Right?
I don't want to. I don't think this is the place to make a a religious or a political stand or anything like that. Right. We are all from different backgrounds and that kind of stuff. But the Bible has pulled me out of some very dark places in the last 15 years of my life, including within my marriage.
I've gotten really spiritual lately. So like I listen to tarot card readings almost daily for the last 9 months now. There's a bunch of things in those regards, but those are all just they're different routes. And one thing I have noticed though that all of these things have in common, and a big thing they have in following, is they all have community around them. And I think that's probably one of the biggest factors, whether we understand it or not, is community. Having the people we choose to keep around us is massive. Right? If you've got negative naysayers and people who are just always turning whatever the day is into a negative, it doesn't help your depression or anxiety or issues that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But one thing I do want to mention, make sure we touch on today is I wanted to ask you guys, the moment you chose to turn around, look internally inside yourself, to look at all the problems that you had to deal with, the things that you've been refusing to deal with for years, whether you have done it or not done it or preparing to do it. This question stemmed because I have a friend that I was talking about this stuff, and they claim they absolutely cannot spend even 30 seconds in silence because they cannot deal with what their brain has to tell them when they go to stop and like just sit, right? And to me, that's concerning in multiple ways, but I also think it's also like a mental state of like you're telling yourself these things, but it could be fear. I'm not really sure, to be honest. Like, 'cause I've had my problems of turning around and not facing my internal problems, but I've also not. So it's not something I've totally understood, but I also wanted to get it in there for people who may have these similar problems that they're refusing to look at themselves, refusing to turn around and then actually say, hey, you know what does my mind have to say if I sit in silence and listen?
Nothing good. It's like a bad neighborhood, man. No. Never go there alone and never go there after dark.
Well, fear stands for fuck everything and run, right? And that's one of those things. But I mean, I kind of touched on it for me earlier. It was the moment that I decided that it was time to get some help was when, I got suicidal, and I highly, highly, highly do not recommend that. You know, it's if you're not and you think you're immune to it, you're probably not. It's just it hasn't happened. And so for me, I got, I guess you could say, lucky with it that I didn't follow through or I didn't get to complete what I set out to do with my suicidal thought. And it was so beyond fucking terrifying for me that I was able to do that, that's when I was like fully, fully, fully accepting that I needed to get help. And but if you've got to come to a place of acceptance, man, you know, and it's there's a saying that Chris knows it, but you guys probably know it too. It's just when you get sick and tired of being fucking sick and tired, right? Like you'll do some stuff change. And but if you can't sit for 30 seconds and it's just that sounds like really slippery slope. Like it doesn't sound good, right? Like there's no good can come of not being able to sit down for 30 seconds in silence, you know? Yeah. So I would just recommend that before you get to being in a dark, dark, dark place, like most of us have been, don't wait, right? Because not everybody makes it to that. A lot of people don't, right? So I don't know, man. Just get to a place of acceptance, and that's a lot easier said than done, right? Getting to a place of acceptance. But if anything, you're talking to probably 4 or 5 guys that all thought we were special and probably weren't going to be that guy, right? And we ended up being that guy. It's just how it is. So before you think you're special and you're not that guy, you probably are. It just hasn't happened yet, you know? So like I said in the beginning, dude, I highly do not recommend waiting till then to get help because you might not make it out of it.
Yeah. It's once you turn around and you start looking internally, it's a tsunami. You're trying to drink from a fire hose of what your brain has literally been. Because if you really think about it, when you shove this stuff down inside and you don't address it, you're literally shoving it inside, right? It's like filling the closet when you're cleaning, right? You can only fill it to the ceiling, and then eventually it's going to explode and you can't fit anymore. But when you actually go to take the time to look at yourself and go look at these things and listen to the stuff you have inside, you're gonna get knocked down. And I just want to prep people of that stuff. Is like when you turn around and you say, you know what, I've been dealing with emotions, or I've got something inside that I just can't face and I need to face it. When you open it up to it and you start seeing it, you're gonna get punched, you're gonna get knocked over, and you're gonna fall. Your internals are going to beat you up. And I think one of the things I've recognized it the most was trying to get meditation. I started getting into meditation when my marriage was failing. My last one of the tech jobs that I had, they gave you the Headspace app. Phenomenal. I hate the new UI setup they have now, but back then it was phenomenal. It was the most productive thing I think I've ever done for my own headspace. Headspace. But it was whenever you would sit down, you would just get overwhelmed with your brain. Like everything that would come out, you're just like, I can't handle dealing with all of this stuff coming at me. I don't want to deal with that problem. I don't want to deal with that problem. I have 42,000 problems that need to all get dealt with the same level of intensity. And I don't know what to do. It's so overwhelming. And I realized after I put in couple 100 hours of meditation over a year or two, that eventually turn around and facing that internals. I'm framing this out as if your internal is a separate person who's been holding on to all your problems for you. But when you turn around and face that version of yourself and you start dealing with those problems, you have all of that noise you've been ignoring for years. You have to siphon through that mess. And that's where having a therapist helps, because they can help guide you and keep you in line and keep you in track. But if you're not going to go with a therapist and you're not going to go get help in that regard, you're going to face it on your own, and it is going to run you over. And the biggest biggest praying to God in that regards is that you get back up and you just say, you know what? I'm just going to take this in the face until it's fucking over. And then eventually, it may take a year, it may take 10 years, but eventually you will get to a point. I had a conversation this afternoon with a friend who called, the same person you spoke to, Chris. And he was telling me the day he noticed that he had real healing, he cried. And it just blew him away because he went from years of being depressed and almost suicidal to waking up and being like, you know what? I'm actually happy today. And it's one of those things I want to prep people for is that you have a lot. If you've been bottling it in for years, you have a lot to process before you get to a point of success.
But
once you have that, success is so fucking good.
And it sounds scary and it sounds daunting, right? But like for me, that's where the man up comes from, right? Like because like through my experience, like I had that same experience that our mutual friend had, where once I cleared my plate, it took me like 2 or 3 days to like come around and feel okay, right? Because I was like, and it wasn't the stuff that I thought it was going to be. And I talked about this, I touched on it the last episode, right? Like, it wasn't the stuff I thought it was going to be. It was the stuff that my mind had suppressed. It was the stuff that, helped. It was like my foundation, right? And like my mind bottling that and hiding it away to protect me. And that's words from my therapist, right? Like I took that stuff and I bottled it up, and my mind put it in the back in a jar to protect my mind, right? And then, but like you keep going and you keep going, and it gets full, and then eventually it just all comes out all at once, and that's where I was, right? And then once I started, and I got through it, like it took a little bit to come back, to baseline or to get my true zero, right? But it was night and day difference, right? And it was difficult to, I mean, like I told you guys, like I quit after that, right? Like, and now I'm back to square one. And I talked to Kevin about it today. Like, I'm back to square one. I went in there, last week. I had to hit the 1-800-PANIC, number and like go that route. And like I said earlier, just picking up that phone and having that person who I know is going to be with me through that journey of healing is like weight being lifted off my shoulders, right? And like, so it's scary, especially for, a man of my character. I'm sure your guys' character, like it can be scary, but it's also one of those things for me that I'm trying to be better, not only a better father to my son, a better husband to my wife, but a better coworker, a better friend, a better boss, right? Like I'm trying to be at 100% for those folks around me. So it's hard, but I feel like it's worth it.
So hard.
So hard. Don't be a pussy. Go.
And that's
go
it. I love it. That was one of the big things I want to make sure we talked about, was just the willingness to eventually face it.
Well, because if you're
the success you're going to get from that, man, you'll feel dumb that you didn't do it earlier. I promise you. I promise you. So it is.
Tune in next week, and we're going to discuss how you can be of service to someone who is asking you for help.
How to be the hand that reaches out for the hand that's reaching out.
Right.
That works.
I like it.
We're so dumb.
Don't ask me to spell that.
Just roll.
Dude, Phenomenal.
I just want to say real quick as we're kind of winding this down and bullshitting a little bit. You dads and husbands, you blue collar guys, you office guys, like, we see you. We're going through the same shit, and if you need something, say something.
Yeah,
we love you guys. The world is a better place with you here. Call us, email us, call your dad, call your brother, call your friend, call whoever. But the world's a better place with you here. So stick around.
we love you guys.
Good stuff.
Fucking motivation. Let's see. How is there anything else? Thank you for tuning in, everyone.
So this episode has been brought to you by False Motivation Coffee. If you go to falsemotivationcoffee.com, you can go and you can get your favorite coffee brew. I personally recommend the Cowboy Blend. That's my favorite. It tastes delicious. But we also have flavors such as Turtle, and we have the new Pumpkin Spice, and we also have one coming out for the Marine Corps birthday called Whiskey Barrel Blend, I do believe. I have one coming. Haven't tried it
Whiskey
yet,
barrel aged.
Whiskey barrel aged. I stand corrected. Again, that's falsemotivation.com. Go get your.
Make sure you use promo code Kevin when you order your stuff to get a little discount.
Buy a rash guard. It's great for jiu-jitsu. Everybody loves the movie.
Now, does it taste good if you weren't in the Marine Corps, or is that's just the thing?
It just tastes
anything aged in a whiskey barrel is going to taste amazing. So I don't know. No, so the whiskey barrel aged flavor is our Marine Corps birthday bag. So shout out to the Marine Corps birthday. Hoorah!
Right.
If you want to support your friends, please like and subscribe, but most importantly, share it with someone who might benefit from it. And then, if you'd like to sponsor the podcast, please check out falsemotivation.com. Oh, and one last signing off. If you've got no one else, send us a message on one of our social media platforms. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. Send us a message, send us a video, send us a conversation. You can do it privately, you can do it publicly. If you're doing it publicly, there's a chance you might help somebody else. But I know not everyone's comfortable with going with this private stuff publicly, so do it privately. Somebody here will respond and help you out as much as we can. But don't hesitate. We're all here for the same reason, man. We love people.
Good seeing you, fellas.
That's it.
All right, guys.
All right, boys.
Great episode.